that 91% of property investors forget about. Now, this is something I want to talk about because, like I said, 91% of Australian property investors do not take this into consideration. They forget about these things. These are the most crucial things when it comes to property investing. I should say, a lot of these people will go out there, just look at property and look where it is and just look at the brick and mortar, and then they'll just purchase it. But there's a lot of things when it comes to property investing, and you have to make sure you do the right due diligence to understanding if this property is going to be in a great property in a great location, and if it's going to fit your budget, and if it's going to cost you money, or if it's not going to cost you money. And these are things you got to take into consideration. There's a lot of things involved. So let's get into it. Now, what do we need to look at? So number one, it's going to be, I guess, first a cash flow analysis. If you've got a cash flow calculator, if you haven't got one, please just reach out to us. We've got a free cash flow calculator that we can give to you guys to understand that where you can put all the metrics of the property fundamentals. So the rent, how much you purchased the property, how much it's renting out for, what's your interest rate, what loan package is it, is it interest only, principal and interest, how much were all your closing costs when you put the close on the property, so your pest and building, your conveyancer fees, your mortgage fees, your stamp duty, LMI, etc. So then it tells you how much the property is going to cost you exactly to settle on the property. Then that cash flow calculator will even tell you where you enter in the council rates, the utilities, your insurance policy, if it's got body corp, if it's got any maintenance or any upgrades you have to do straight away. Anything that it comes down to, all the expenses, you can enter all these in. And then, of course, it's going to give you a prediction of how much the property is going to give you. Sorry, not prediction. It's going to give you the total, cost or income, per month, or by an annual figure, or, and if the property is going to cost you anything. So then it gives you an understanding, okay, is this property negative geared, is it neutral geared, or is it positive geared? So then you can understand what it's going to do for your, for your financial situation, and for you to reach your, your goals when it comes to property investing. So this is super important. People don't take this into consideration. They just go buy something with their eyes blinded, and they're not sure if the property is going to cost them money or at all. They just quickly do off some quick numbers off the top of their head. But when you got to factor in every single expense, everything that the property is going to cost you, there's a lot of things that we don't take into consideration. We buy a property, and I've got some things on the list here, and these things can add up. So let's go to the next one. I guess flood zones, bushfire zones, flight overlay zones. So you don't want to be in a flood zone. You don't want to even be close to a flood zone, because if it's flooded in a certain area before, you don't want to be there and just risk and say, oh, look, I'm only 50 meters or 20 meters down the road where it last flooded. It's all right. I'm pretty far away from it. How do you know if something happens again, it's not going to be more significant and will affect your property? So you don't want to take those risks. Same goes with bushfire zones. So if you're close to big forests or parks or something that's happened in the previous years, that will come up on these. These are things you can as well get on the council website. So if you're close to those bushfire zones or flood zones, while you're looking up on these council websites where they've got a portal that can tell you exactly where the property is, these are things you don't want to take into consideration, or you don't want to be in there because they're going to affect your property. Same goes with flight overlay zones. You don't want to be in a flight path zone where the planes are flying past and there's a lot of noise, a lot of interruptions. So this is something that you got to take into consideration as well, because that's going to affect your property price, and it's going to affect, I guess your tenant, because the tenant can maybe rock up there and they might hear these planes going by, especially if you're very close to the airport. It's going to affect, your property a lot. Now, next thing, easements. Looking at a property, you do not want to buy a property with an easement on the property, because if you want to do a development, you want to maybe build a garage or extend the property, you've got restrictions where the easement is. So this is something that's super crucial, and you've got to take in consideration, making sure you're doing the right due diligence. These are things that will come up on the title search, or as well when you're making sure you're taking the right precautions when you're investing in property. Next thing, residential zoning. Where's a property located and what's the residential zoning? So is it low density, medium density, high density? Some other councils don't use those words. They might use neighborhood zoning or residential zoning or whatever it may be. They're all, every location is different. So, but you got to understand, if you've got a plan and you said, I want to develop on this property, or I want to put a granny flat, or I want to subdivide the block, are you allowed to do it on this block that you're purchasing? Now, that's something to take into consideration. You've got to make sure that that property is something where it's maybe a high or a medium density where you can do these things to the property. So that's something to take in consideration. Caveats. So if there's anything on the property, any caveats, any red flags, something that's, something that stands out. So this is where you make sure that you get the contracts and everything reviewed by the solicitor to making sure that there's nothing wrong or any caveats on the property. Now, next thing, main roads, and I guess in corner and connecting roads. You do not want to buy property on a main road or a connecting road. So a connecting road can be a main road, a road or a street off a main road, but it's still a busy street. It's not as busy as a main road. These things will affect your property. And, when it comes to renting out a property to a tenant, they want easy access. They don't want to be able to, they've got to reverse out of the driveway and they're on a main road or a connecting road and it's busy traffic. These are things that are red flags that you want to stay away from. Surrounding green land. So if you're investing in, locations, maybe you're out of fringe suburbs from capital cities or regional towns. Now, you don't want to be on the outskirts where there's a lot of green land access. So there's farms and parks and all this land that's accessible, and it's got a residential zoning on those lands where they can actually turn that down the track into your residential housing. And why I say that is because that will affect your property. If there's going to be a supply of properties getting released to the market and you've bought a property right next to a green land field, that all that it takes is a developer to come in there and knock down that farm or forest or whatever it may be and start, building properties, houses. And these will affect, because why they will affect your property, because then you're going to have an oversupply of property. If you've got 100 properties coming to the market, what's that going to do to property prices in that suburb? It's going to have an effect. The supply versus demand is going to drop. So this is something to take into consideration. So you want to be close to those in-fringe suburbs or close to the CBDs or close to those hubs or those regional centers, CBD centers, because you're right there in the hub where you cannot, knock down a farm and build more houses. So this is something that you got to take in consideration. I guess getting a title search, checking with your conveyancer. So when you get the contract, before you sign anything, before you start saying, I'm going to buy this property and just go out there and sign, get the contract, get the title, make sure you get a title search, go to your conveyancer, ask them to check the property. Now, things might pop up. It might have the easement come up, it might have caveats, it might have other things that will pop up on there. So this is something to make sure. And it's something to make sure if the property has had a renovation, it's had an extension, or something like these things where maybe it's had a new garage put on the back, making sure that they have council approval. So this is why it's really crucial to go to your conveyancer, making sure these things have had, if they had a pergola in the backyard, has it been approved by the council? This is something to make sure, because if you do not do your checks and something happens and then it's not approved, there's going to be dramas down the track. So making sure you do these checks as well. Something that everyone forgets about is insurance fees. I go into a region, I'm looking how much the insurance is going to cost me for a particular property. Now, if the insurances are through the roof, some places that we've looked in the past, great investment property grade properties, great location, growing in value, but insurance is through the roof. I'm talking over $2,500. Some properties were $4,000 for insurance just for a freestanding home. You want to stay away from these locations, and that can be because maybe it's had some dramas in the past from cyclones or flooding, or it's in a high risk area. So these are the things you've got to make sure you do your due diligence, get a insurance policy quote from Allianz, Amy, whoever it may be, just to see how much the property is going to cost you. So you want to make sure that it's not going to affect your cash flow. If you're paying, $2,500, $3,000 or more for insurance for a freestanding home, that is a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot away from cash flow away from your situation. So that's something to take into consideration. I guess development potential, which kind of goes back to residential zoning, but if you want to develop on this property, you got to make sure that you can. And so as well, that's come down to the conveyancer, making sure they can do those checks for you as well, and understanding, I guess, the soil, where the property is. I guess if you can do things like that, and understanding, I guess, doing your checks when it comes to doing a development. It's not a straightforward thing as just checking the zoning. There's a lot of things with soil and I guess where the property is situated, slopes, and if it's on a hill or if it's built on a decline. these things here are going to affect, if you want to do a development, it's going to cost you more money. So you're going to take that into consideration as well. So you want to buy properties on a flat block, nice and level. You don't have to put any retaining walls. They're going to cost you a lot of money. There's a lot of things that comes involved. So make sure as well, if you're going to go down that route of development, speaking with a builder, someone that is well qualified in that field that can help you and assist you. Last one, I guess, the neighborhood surroundings. Now, if you're not there and you can't see the property, you're buying something, through, over the internet or over the phone, this is something where you're going to make sure you get an independent person to make sure they inspect the property on your behalf and understand where the property is. As well, you want to make sure that you're in a good street, a good neighborhood where there's properties where the houses are very well kept, and that comes down to owner-occupiers living there because they look after their properties more compared to your tenants or your investors that own those properties, because they don't really look after the properties compared to an owner-occupier. Now, not just that, you want to make sure you're not buying next door to maybe a derelict house where there's cars and rubbish all at the front. You don't want to be buying where the street is all messy and it looks really, really unpresentable. And how you check these things is through Google Earth or Google Maps, making sure you can get a ground view and have a look at the street. This is very important because if you're buying in a street, or it's a very, a street that's not very owner-occupied appealing, and that's going to affect your rental side of things, then it's probably not a great investment as well. So you got to take in that consideration. Do your research. Speak to town planners, evaluators. Speak to people that work at the council, even real estate agents, property management. Asking them about these certain streets and these certain pockets of this area. Are these desirable areas? Are they good for the tenants? Do people want to live there? These are things that you got to take into consideration. So hopefully you got something from this video. These are things, like I said, 91% of Australian investors do not take this in consideration. That's why only 75% of Australians only have one investment property, because they don't do this research. This is a due diligence where you've got to make sure before you purchase that property, you do these checks. This will finalize and make sure that this property is going to be an A grade property. You don't want to invest in a B grade, a C grade property. You want an A grade in property because you're going to get an A grade results. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like, share, subscribe. Share this video with other people that are looking to invest in property. Thank you for watching this video.